It was a normal Friday evening, and we'd all been sat here actually having tea, and Josh was in a rush because he was off out to a 20th birthday party of a friend of his. So as normal 20-year-olds do. So scoffed tea down and was so bothered about how his hair was and how he looked and everything, and I'd ironed his shirt and done all that, and he stood here, and I took a photograph of him, and it was really very strange because I'll show you the photograph, and I have a photograph, and his words were, he stood right here, and he it was a new t-shirt that he just got from Top Man, and he just said, "Does this make my chest look too hairy, Mum?" And it was obviously those words will just stay forever in my mind and in my head. I can hear them now, but yeah, and no, he didn't make his chest look too hairy, and he looked lovely, and that was that. He gave me a big hug, told me he loved me, and was out of the door, out to the gate, and he turned at the gate and waved and just said, "See you later," and mouthed, "Loved you, see you later," and off he went. So that was at 6:30, and his time of death was 7:05, so 35 minutes later. I was actually on my way, travelling up the same road that Josh had travelled up, and my mobile rang, and I noticed it was Josh's best friend, so I pulled over and answered the phone, and I just heard him in a complete state of utter panic saying, "Where are you, Becci? Where are you? Come quick!" And I said, "Well, I'm just on my way to Hazelmere," and he said, "There's been a really, really bad accident and Josh is in the car." And I was 2 minutes away from the accident. I would have been going up that same road to get to Hazelmere. So I just threw my phone. I remember throwing my phone down in the passenger footwell and driving and still shouting to Ray on the phone, I'm there, I'm just there." News had travelled that there'd been this crash, and there were other people arriving at the scene, and I honestly don't know how long I was there for. I lost complete track and sense of time. I was bothered about trying to get hold of Max because he was out with his friends, and I couldn't get hold of him, and I couldn't get hold of Josh's dad, and then eventually a policeman came and arrived, and he had a white hat on, and I know that policemen that wear white hats are traffic officers, and there was quite a lot of people there then, because I remember just sensing a lot of people around, and yet he was making this beeline towards me, and I remember thinking, why is he walking towards me? And on his badge he had family liaison officer, and I know what family liaison officers do, and I didn't want a family liaison officer walking towards me, and he just asked me, "Who was I, Josh's mum?" And I said yeah, and he asked me to come and get in the car, and I remember shouting to this policeman, "Just tell me he's okay," and the look on his face, he stood there and he handed me his passport, and I knew it was his passport. I instantly recognised his passport because he carried it on him for ID reasons, as young kids do. I remember him saying that he was really, really sorry. I remember just trying to shoving my fingers and everything in my mouth to try and stop me from screaming. And that was that. I did eventually get in his car, I guess, and then he took me round back up to the other side of the scene, where there was now a lot of people at the other side of the crash gathered, the majority of them Josh's friends, and nobody knew what was going on. And then of course I arrived in a police car, and Kieran one of Josh's really, really close friends came up and just said, "What's happening, Becky, what's happening?" And I had to tell them, and I remember hearing these boys, these 20-year-old men just screaming, absolutely screaming. And they were all watching it from one end, and I was trapped at the other end, watching it from the other end, so horrible to be there. And then I somehow had to get myself together because I had to get hold of Max. I had to find Max, and by this time everybody, you know what it's like with social media and Facebook and Twitter, and there was no way that I wanted my family finding out that way. I mean, can you imagine that happening? So eventually we did get hold of Max, and the policeman eventually brought me back here. And then I remember thinking, how am I going to tell Max, 15-year-old boy, how am I going to tell him? Josh was a passenger in a car driven by a mate of his at the time, I guess. And they were travelling up a road with a speed limit of 40 miles an hour. The impact, the driver lost control of the car on a bend and hit a tree. The car hit the tree at a sideways impact, and it rolled up the tree and came back down on its wheels. And the impact of the car, the police say that the speedo stuck. Evidently that's what happens, all the airbags came out, but the speedo stuck at 63 miles an hour. So even around the corner, the guy was travelling at least 23 miles an hour over the legal limit of 40. You can't even get around that bend at 40. We've done it so many times. Josh has driven that road so many times. He suffered horrendous head injuries and died almost immediately at the scene. While I was standing at the roadblock trying my best to get to him and not allowed to, all the blue lights and the ambulances and the fire engines were just whizzing past me, and I was there not knowing what the hell was happening, really, trying desperately to get to him, and I couldn't. And he died without me being there, and I was literally a minute away. The impact that it had on the community and of friends, and we said, there was about 750 people that came to his funeral. And when I speak about Josh on the stage at Safe Drive, I say these words about him because this is him to a T. And I say he was always so full of life and always smiling and laughing, and he had such a characteristic laugh. And he had such beautiful eyes and really long eyelashes, and I remember thinking when I was identifying, why don't you open your eyes, because they were closed and I couldn't see the colour of his eyes anymore. And I remember saying to him, you need to wake up, come on, wake up. It's strange what you do, isn't it? And I stroked his face and I kissed him on his lips. And that sensation, because he was so cold, and that sensation of kissing him stayed on my lips for hours. And coming back in the police car, I never said a word. I couldn't speak, obviously, but I remember just feeling this tingly, weird sensation on my lips that just seemed to. And I remember thinking, I don't ever want that to leave now. I want that to be there forever. But sadly, it did so. And And I say here that he was and he always will be the light of my life, and he was, because he was my firstborn son, and I know Max is loved and adored just as much. But with your firstborn son, it's just that bond between mums and their boys, and he was one in a billion. You know, and I say here, he was kind, he was loving, happy, loyal, humble, affectionate, hardworking, appreciative, and he always wanted to help people. He would light up any room, and I'm not saying this because he's just my son, but he would light up any room that he would walk into. You can probably tell that from those photographs, and I say that ironically, he was a perfect angel, and he was. Yeah, he was sometimes a really naughty boy, but in the way that he was, and his persona, and how his soul was, and where his heart was, he was a perfect angel, and that is so ironic as to why he was taken away, really. To me, it was absolute therapy, standing there and telling Josh's story and talking about him, and amazing, really, with this huge screen and his beautiful photos that come up. Very sad, very sad, very hard, but very rewarding for me. Probably not from, not everybody can do it, but it was something that I wanted to do. It's something that does save lives. It's proven that it does save lives, and if we can educate young drivers, potential young drivers, people at college who cannot yet drive and yet are still getting into cars with friends, just like Josh did. I mean, he could drive, but he got into a car that night as a passenger. To tell that passenger to slow down, to stop driving like an idiot, to stop the car, to get out of the car. No parent is never ever going to come and not pick their child up if they've got out of a car with an idiot driving. So yeah, an absolute passion to instill that message, and to stop other families from going through it, from going through what we now have to go through for no choice, what we now have to live with for the rest of our lives. And even if in an audience of 1,000 16 to 18-year-olds, if that, my message and the message that we put across, can sink in just to one person, and we can just save one person's life out of 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000, or in the Surrey, we spoke to about 18,000 students in the 2 weeks that we did last year. If we can just save one, then we've done something. Then he wouldn't have died for nothing.